Houston, contact with a test. 1.
Hello, it's Scott Manley here. Earlier in this week, space watchers were met with the surprise announcement that Chris Ferguson was leaving Boeing's crewed flight test mission. The mission is supposed to be the first flight demonstration of the CST-100 Starliner with a crew on board. And this is currently expected to fly to the International Space Station sometime in 2021 with a crew of 3. Now, the announcement includes the usual line about Chris wanting to spend more time with his family, and of course, this is usually code to hide some other reason, but there's absolutely a plausible more time with family reason here. His daughter is planning a wedding next year, and he wouldn't want to be away during this significant life event. But there may be other contributing reasons, and I want to talk about those later. But first of all, let's just talk about commercial crew assignments. For the planned flight, he's actually being replaced by NASA astronaut Barry or Butch Wilmore, who will join Nicole Mann and Mikey Finke on, whenever they fly. But there have been many changes to commercial crew assignments over time. The program's been going on for quite a while, and the first batch was announced in a NASA blog posting back in 2015. And back then, it said that they had Eric Boe, Sunita Williams, Bob Behnken, and Doug Hurley, and they were going to be the first astronauts training to fly the new spacecraft. And the announcement was in a blog by Charles Bolden, who also said that the target date was 2017, and of course he chastised Congress for not delivering the level of funding that commercial crew that the Obama administration had requested since 2011. I mean, for those that don't know, in the first few years of commercial crew, the funding was not what it should be. In some cases, it was literally taken from the program by politicians and redirected to support SLS, which sort of explains some of its delays. Anyway, again in 2018, we saw another crew announcement, and this time it was a big, high-profile live event streamed on the internet, hosted by Jim Bridenstine, and this announcement had the CST-100 crew being Eric Boe, Nicole Mann, and Chris Ferguson. And so Chris, at this time, he was a curious addition because he wasn't a NASA astronaut anymore. He'd retired to work at Boeing. So in theory, he was going to be going along as a private citizen, acting as a representative of the spacecraft's owner, offering technical assistance on this first flight. And yeah, that would mean 3 crew members on this flight as opposed to 2 on SpaceX's first crewed flight. But this was also a PR move because Chris had been the shuttle commander for STS-135. That was the last shuttle mission to the space station. So he was an important link to the process of returning astronauts to space using US launch vehicles. He'd helped put the flag there for the capture of the flag. And so the chance of him being involved in its return to Earth had a great, PR potential attached to it. But that contest has now been won by SpaceX taking the flag, and so one of the main values that he brought to the team was no longer there. In addition, I think there's the fact that NASA has extended the flight of DM2 so that Bob and Doug spent more than a couple of weeks in space, and they contributed directly to ISS operations. They performed critical EVAs, for example. And it would be logical that NASA might be considering the same thing for Starliner's first crewed flight. But having a private astronaut on board who's only responsible for the spacecraft would complicate things. What would they do, right? How would they extend the mission? So it's possible that there was some request from NASA to replace Chris with a NASA astronaut who would be, able to perform these duties. And I mean, I know that Chris is more than capable of doing all of this. He's proved it in the past, but since he's not a NASA astronaut, it might be legally more complicated to have him, say, considered for EVAs. So Barry Wilmore, he obviously is a NASA astronaut, and he does actually have a link to STS-135 because he was the Capcom during launch and ascent. And by the way, there was another crew change that happened, if you didn't notice. Back in early 2019, Eric Boe was replaced by Michael Finke for medical reasons. And yeah, Michael Finke also has shuttle experience. Either way, we still don't know when this flight will happen. Boeing will have to refly their orbital flight test and demonstrate rendezvous and docking with the International Space Station using an uncrewed capsule, showing that the multitude of software problems that they encountered on their first flight have been fixed. And right now, this mission is slated for no earlier than January 2021. So that means then the first crewed Starliner flight is sort of penciled in for maybe July of 2021, and the first operational flight would be in December, and that would have Sunita Williams and everyone. So yeah, since OFT-1's mess, more information has actually emerged about Boeing's approach to the whole thing. While it was a fixed price contract, I've heard that Boeing management always expected to be able to change the terms and get more money from NASA. And part of this was many people at Boeing believed that SpaceX's much lower bid wouldn't be able to deliver at that price, and they would need to negotiate for more money, and that would open the door for Boeing to perhaps get more money or grab a bigger piece of the pie. I mean, this is all stuff that's largely quoted from sort of anonymous sources elsewhere. Anyway, the first operational flight of Crew Dragon is expected in November. The crew will be Michael Hopkins, Victor Glover, Shannon Walker, and Soichi Noguchi, and they'll be set for a 7-month stay in orbit on the space station. They have now named their capsule Resilience, which as far as I can tell doesn't have any link to any famous exploration vessels from history. But it is just a straight up good name, reflecting the tough times of 2020. Before then, in a few days' time, Soyuz MS-17 is expected to launch. That will be October 14th, and it will be carrying NASA astronaut Kate Rubins for a 6-month stay. And as of this time, she's the last NASA astronaut scheduled to fly on a Soyuz. That could change, certainly. But yeah, obviously NASA is moving away from the Soyuz. As for Russians flying on US launchers, they did actually have a slot open on Crew 1 that could have been used by a cosmonaut. But as I understand it, the spacecraft isn't considered certified by Roscosmos at this time, so maybe in the future, maybe. There's another significant story related to Boeing's OFT-1 debacle. In the investigations that followed the troubled flight, it became clear that many of the software problems would have actually been caught by integrated testing between the various components, rather than testing each component individually on its own, hooked up to a test harness. And the best example of this would be when a mission clock was assumed by one component to start at launch, while the clock was actually started by the booster hours before the launch. And this has actually led to a recent Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel meeting expressing similar concerns about Artemis 1, as it's become clear they don't have a fully integrated software test for SLS, Orion, and the various ground systems. And at this time, there's no time or budget to add such tests to make sure everything works. Artemis 1 is, of course, going through its green run right now, but that is years late already. And there's pressure to meet this 2024 lunar landing date. That means that adding any testing is going to be a hard sell. Of course, that 2024 date is largely a political choice driven by a president who would be forced out of office at the end of a second term regardless. Many, including me, don't expect the 2024 landing date to happen. Government funding for this program is coming in below what NASA is requesting, and there's an election next month that could change the president to somebody who isn't going to be forced out of office in 2024, and so could happily let the schedule slip to 2025 or later in the names of doing it right or doing it safe. I'm Scott Manley. Fly safe.